From beautiful downtown Millheim, in the smack dab center of the Keystone State, this is Lou Bryson with Seen Through a Glass, a podcast that's mostly about food and drink in central Pennsylvania. Welcome to episode 50, Bottled in Bond, or A Shot in a Beer. I continue to disappoint. Episode 50 is not the extravaganza or monster interview I'd hoped to deliver. It's actually going to be a fairly short episode, Lou talking-wise. At least in part, that's because I got sick again. It may have actually happened at the Philly Beer Fest I mentioned last episode. Kathy and I went down for that, and it was wild. We had dinner with my son Tom the night before, a great meal at Bar Huga, with a glass of a beer I helped design over 25 years ago, Percuno's Hammer. We'll revisit that a bit later. Anyway, the next morning, I got up and did a promo spot for the festival at the Philadelphia Fox affiliate, drinking on air with the morning show people. And then Kathy and I got some great coffee and went off to the fest. I was doing 2 seminars, teamed with the festival organizer, my old colleague and friend Marnie Old, an experienced wine educator and author who just happens to absolutely love German beer. We each presented 4 beers. Mine were from Pennsylvania, hers were from Germany. We talked about them, breezy and entertaining, but factual, and then we tasted them with the group, then did an audience vote to see who had won. It was all fun and games. Between sessions, I got to say hi to a lot of Philly beer friends I don't see anymore. I had some beers, and I hung out with Yuengling Brewmaster Emeritus John Callahan, good friend and just such a guy. Oh, and I opened the festival. I was the honorary German beer ambassador for Pennsylvania, so I got to make a toast and officially declare the event open, with the help of an extremely enthusiastic crowd. Got a nice mug, too. But, like a few other folks that were there, I got a nasty head cold out of it, which, by last Thursday, had pretty much laid me flat. Some of the interviews fell apart, and I had to scramble to get what I got, and I'm very grateful to Al Laws of the Laws Whiskey House in Denver and his publicist for putting together an interview so quickly. The interview was on the occasion of National Bottled in Bond Day, which was on March 3rd, the anniversary of the publication of the Bottled in Bond Act. You know, I'm getting ahead of myself. Instead of talking about Bottled in Bond whiskey, I'm going to have some, because here's what I'm drinking today. What I'm drinking today is, appropriately enough, a Bottled in Bond whiskey, the Balboa Rye from New Riff Distilling in Newport, Kentucky. New Riff takes their name from being a new riff on old traditions. They proudly use a column still to make their whiskeys. They do a lot of Bottled in Bond bottlings, all released without chill filtering. This particular rye is also an old tradition. Balboa Rye is an heirloom strain popular in the 1940s, grown today exclusively for New Riff by an area farmer. I'm not going to read the tasting notes. I want to taste this fresh. The bottle was just released at the end of January and retails for $55. Here goes. The Balboa, it pours an interesting shade. I usually don't comment on the color of the whiskey, but this has a really interesting red tone to it. It's almost pink. Pretty cool. Wow. A lot going on in the nose. Some of it light and delicate, some of it fairly strong. And it's an interesting phenomenon in that the light stuff actually slides by. I'm getting notes of candy and cough lozenges, like an old style cough lozenge. I can picture a bag, like a white and black waxed paper bag, maybe eucalyptus or horehound. That's it. Yeah. But there's a delicate spice to it as well, like a pastille of some kind. We better try this monster. Oh my. That is spicy and warming without being overwhelming. I can tell already this is going to be good for my cold. Warm but not hot at 100 proof. I want to say there's berry there, but I almost wonder if I'm being fooled by the pinkish tinge of the whiskey. There's a lot of spice and fruit here, some delicate sweetness and some fairly firm bitterness at the same time. There's a lot going on in this whiskey. It almost seems to swirl and change on a dime. Just flips right around. The mouthfeel is is interesting. It's quick, does not linger on the tongue, and yet there's a good finish to it. This is I would definitely say this is a lively whiskey. This is a daytime whiskey, I think, because at nighttime it might be too exciting. Although in a club, that could be fun too. I would like to try this with club soda. I'd like to have a highball with this whiskey. I think it would hold up well and make an interesting highball. New Riff's done it again. I think the Balboa Rye has a lot going for it. I applaud what they do, always have, and they have not disappointed here. That was pretty good. Before we put a cork in things and move on, it's time for Smack Dab in the Center, sponsored by the Happy Valley Adventure Bureau. I was thinking about telling you about some great places for breakfast in Center County, but that made me think of something even better: maple syrup. You still have a little time to get tickets for the Maple Harvest Festival at the Shavers Creek Environmental Center on March 22nd and 23rd. The festival includes live music, live animal programs, and costumed interpreters showing how maple sap became maple syrup and sugar in the different cultures in this area over the past 500 years. That includes seeing the modern-day process, tapping trees, gathering the sap, and boiling sap into syrup. It's fascinating. And yes, you will get maple syrup. Your ticket includes a breakfast with pancakes, real maple syrup, 2 locally made pork sausage patties, applesauce, and a beverage. Tickets are $11, $7 for kids. You must get the tickets online before you go. No tickets are available at the gate. And again, that's on March 22nd and 23rd. You can find Shavers Creek and information on the event on the Happy Valley Adventure Bureau website, happyvalley.com. Click on the Explore tab and then select Agriculture and Nature. If we're going to celebrate Bottled and Bond Day, we'll have to talk about what that is. It's easiest to start with why, so that's what we're going to do. The Bottled and Bond Act, that's right, it's a federal law, was a reaction to the sharp and sometimes less than ethical economic practices in whiskey making in the late 1800s. Like the meatpackers in Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, many whiskey sellers were running a business where what was represented on the label sometimes bore little resemblance to what was actually in the bottle. These blenders would mix neutral spirit with flavorings and colorings. Caramel, creosote, wintergreen, prune juice, and glycerin were popular to create whiskey, which infuriated the straight distillers. Genuine aged bourbon cost a lot more to make than this flavored spirit, which was often only days old at the time of bottling. The distillers took their fury to Washington, where it resulted in the Bottled and Bond Act of 1897, March 3rd, 1897. The bond referred to government oversight and regulation, particularly the bonded warehouses established in the wake of the whiskey ring scandal of 1875, a conspiracy of government officials and distillers that evaded excise taxes on whiskey. To comply with the act, whiskey had to be the product of only one distillery from one distilling season, which there are 2 in a year, and with one master distiller supervising. It has to be at least 4 years old, bottled at 100 proof, have no additives other than pure water, and be labeled with the name of the distillery where it was made. And for anyone curious, yes, that's more restrictive than your regulations on single malt scotch. Clearly, this meant that almost all rectifiers' whiskeys were not going to make this cut, and distillers moved to make sure that drinkers knew that Bottled and Bond whiskey was the good stuff. The rectifiers were unimpressed and continued to sell their product simply as whiskey or even old bourbon with no legal restraint. The Bottled and Bond Act turned out to be a first step toward the Taft decision in 1909, when the president got involved and laid down what would become today's defining regulations on what whiskey is, which don't allow creosote, thank God. But that kind of made Bottled and Bond a quirk, a relic, and by about 2005, the only ones left were bottom shelf, under $20, and something serious whiskey drinkers didn't talk about, because they were our secret handshake. If you knew about these solid quality whiskeys that could be had for a minimum of cash, you were in the know, and you shut up about it. But then craft distillers wanted in the club and started making their own Bottled and Bond bottlings. Bartenders loved the value of bottled and bond whiskeys, and the 100 proof power made them stand up in a cocktail. Eventually, we saw new bonded whiskeys, and it's not really a secret anymore. And as I'll discuss with Al Laws, it's not just bourbon anymore either. Rye, wheat, corn, malt, any American whiskey that can be called a straight whiskey can also be a bonded whiskey. You can even get bottled and bond apple brandy from Laird's of New Jersey, and I would advise you to if you can find it. It's wonderful stuff. And here's something weird I learned when I was writing that last book. You can even make bottled and bond vodka. It still has to follow all the rules. 100 proof, 1 distillery, 1 season, aged for at least 4 years in a wooden container. But the wood has to be coated with paraffin or a like substance to keep the vodka from coming in contact with the wood. I mean, you gotta be kidding me. Hey, let's talk to Al Laws. It was a Zoom interview, but we must have caught the internet on a good day because the sound quality is pretty decent. Hey, I'm with Al Laws, the founder of Laws Whiskey House in Denver, Colorado. How you doing?
Hey, doing great, Lou. This is a great pleasure.
Likewise. Especially given the occasion, we're celebrating Bottled and Bond Day, which is pretty cool. I didn't even know there was a Bottled and Bond Day. I don't know how that slipped by me.
There's a day for everything.
There is a day for everything. So I told my listeners, a while ago about my visit to your place in October of 23. Yeah. But some more background would be good. Can you tell us how and why you started Laws Whiskey House? And I especially want to talk about the emphasis on Colorado grain.
Sure. Yeah. No, we started this. Well, it's out of, I can tell you it's passion and blah, 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 blah. Like everyone, if you don't have passion about what you're doing,
you better not.
But I will take it another step further. It's obsession. So I'm pretty obsessed with whiskey in general and have been for a very long time. I started drinking whiskey when I was like 16. Now, remember, I came from Canada, so that's pretty, a little more liberal in that kind of,
all right.
Not so draconian on liquor stuff and booze and everything else. But yeah, there's an obsession here with whiskey, and I spent a lot of time working hard, and I wanted to do something different, and I wanted to do something I was very keen on and that I liked. I've had this, it's kind of, I guess, a little bit of a luxury. I've never really worked anywhere I didn't love, and so it was this I wanted to form. This is harder work than we've ever done before. It's a lot harder than it seems from the outside, as you
right.
Probably know. So, but yeah, I want to start a whiskey distillery. I wanted to do it the right way. I had some dollars to allow me to do that. So I wanted to be strictly focused on just making whiskey. I didn't want to take any shortcuts. And
it's been all your whiskey from the get-go, right?
Yeah, we've never sourced any.
No sourcing, right?
We waited 3.5 years before we put something out. So when we finally put something in the bottle, it was just around 3 years old, around that. That was the age profile of it. And we thought it'd be ready at 2 because we've seen so many other things that were at 2, and it wasn't.
Sure.
And, I've tried so many whiskeys. At one point I had 700. That's nothing to people that collect things now. But back then, that was a pretty big collection. And I studied it in a way. I was a research analyst, right, on Wall Street, sell-side research analyst. So that's what I do. So I read everything, and there wasn't a lot to read, but there was enough. Now there's a whole, library. But back then it was okay, this is what we're going to do. We read, I think I ordered 10 years of back issues of Malt Advocate and read all of them. And I said, okay, well, this is what happens every year, and here's what they focus on. And I liked all those things, like Scotch, I like rye and all these different things, but bourbon is kind of what I really like. So yeah, we started this up and started making it, and I had this really good fortune of when we went to Kentucky to see how it was done on large scale back in 2009, to meet this gentleman through what used to be Old Tom, right? Barton's. And he was the master distiller there prior. He was retired, and we were able to get to meet him just because of person that run PR for Barton's, who shut down for the summer, the classic turnaround. And we ended up at his house in Bardstown, and we hit it off, and a little 1 hour meeting turned into 3. And he's like, what, son, you sound like you want to do it right. And this is Bill Frio. A lot of folks know him.
Yeah.
Wonderful person, wonderful family. And, he's like, son, you're going to do it right. I might have some time to consult, but if you're not going to do it right, and you're not going to listen to what I tell you to do.
Don't waste my time.
I'm retired. Precious time, my friend. I don't have time for this. So I said, no, I want to do it right. And I've read all these things, and so he asked me a question. I'd go, well, it's this, this, and this. And he'd say, oh, okay. But he would never answer a question I asked him. He'd just ask me more questions.
Ah.
And I like that, because I'm like, well,
yeah, right.
This. And he's, well, have you considered this? I'm like, oh, well, that would be, and he's like, yeah, okay, now we're getting somewhere. So right from the very first Spirit run, heads cut. I thought he was going to show me how to do it, and he just sort of sat back and said, it's your whiskey, make your own damn cuts. So I went right back to math and started calculating, a percentage of, what would be heads, and that's how I did it to start. Like, that was really interesting to watch, but that's not how you should do it. So, but yeah, there's a lot of I wanted to have physical, tangible interaction with this. And all of our people in the village that we have now all still want that. When we made upgrades even a few years back, they're like, oh, do you want automation? None of them want that. They want to physically turn those valves. They want to be engaged with what they're making because they're very proud of it. And that's sort of the culture we have here. Very much about the whiskey. I wish we had more, hey, it should be about sales and marketing. That would be nice. But we're really good at making whiskey. Less good at selling it.
Yeah, that's always a problem, isn't it?
It certainly is, yeah.
Yeah. So the grain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did want to talk about that.
So when we started, we wanted to, we had this kind of hey, we want it to taste like where it's from.
Mm-hmm.
Because I believe that's what whiskey is. Like all these whiskeys, whether they're in Scotland, whether in Canada, they all have a sense of place from the terroir where they're made and what they're made out of. And I believe that thoroughly. It's not because I like wine and could tell you about wine that way. I don't drink wine. So it was, to me, the grapes had real terroir. And I'm like, oh, I want to taste like Colorado, where I'm from. And then nobody would sell me grain.
Oh my God, no, really?
I contact the Corn Association thinking this will be easy. We'll have 3 or 4 people wanting to bring in the corn. And they're like, what? What are you doing? No, I'm not driving into the big smoke of Denver. You're like, are you kidding me? And then, small grains, I'm like, well, I don't know where to get that. And so we started out with really high quality grain from the Midwest made by Brees.
Oh, yeah.
Brees, very good malting company, very good raw grain provider. But early on, we were making this on weekends. Long weekends were the best because I'd have 3 days to engage in this. So we're only making 12 barrels a month. But I ran wheat malt. So our mash bill for the 4 grain has wheat in it, 20%, but some of that 20% was wheat malt.
Oh.
And so we didn't have any. So I'm we ran out. I can't order 2 bags from Brees. It comes in on pallets. So I had to go to homebrew stores. I went to homebrew stores.
Oh my God.
I'm like, hey, what do you got? And they're like, oh, well, we have, bags of this. Here's 3 different types. And I'm like, what's this one? It's just craft paper, with a stamp on it. And it's in Colorado malting. And I'm like, oh, that's a local malting company down Alamosa. They make this stuff. They're big into selling, specialty grains to brewers. And I'm like, oh, okay, let me take that. And that changed everything for us right out of the gate, 3 months in, because wow, it just lit up the whole distillery. The sweetness, 25 pounds in a mash bill, and it changed everything. This is it's super fresh. It had great aromatics to it, and bam, we're like, whoa, this is great. Need to do
this. And this was barley malt or wheat malt?
This is wheat malt. So
wheat malt. Wow. Okay.
Hey, I'm this little tiny thing in Denver. I'm looking for raw rye. I'm looking for barley malt. I'm looking for this wheat malt and raw wheat. Do you have all this? And he's like, yeah, we have that. I'm like, okay, well, I'd like to order some. And they're like, this is great. This is great. And they're like, well, how much? I said, well, I need about 5 tons. And it just went, I tell the story a lot. This phone went silent. and they're like, what? And they're like, well, when would you need this? I'm like 4 or 5 weeks, 6 weeks. Because, oh yeah, okay, we can do this. Because at that time they had one tub that they're malting out of. And they're like the first craft malting company in the country. And
so you're too small for Brees and you're too big for these guys.
Yeah, like
almost
that's
too
kind
big.
of how it starts. But now,
Yeah.
they definitely have grown, and we're we're not everything and anything and everything to. But they literally, this was the biggest order. Jason says the biggest order they ever got, and they don't even open for like a year and a half or so at that point.
Okay.
So that's how we started with it, and it makes a big difference. And it's not just that it's local grain. There's varietal in this, right? There's SLB rye, only grown in that part of the country. Centennial white wheat, which is a spring wheat. It's very different. It's almost like rye. It's a little bit more gummy. And the scarlet varietal barley, which all these things have distinctive taste. They're not grown for yield. So our malt, even, which is for conversion in most places, provides a lot of flavor to our whiskey. So we get all these flavors, all the 4 American mother grains. We get all these flavors in every sip of our 4-grain bourbon.
Oh, that's right. You do the 4-grain. Yeah.
So there's technique to this. Like, it didn't start out that way. It largely tasted like a rye bourbon because the rye is pretty. It's a bully.
Rye's powerful stuff. Yeah,
it punches up. So yeah, we started with that, and it made a big difference. And then we went after corn. Like, we're like, well, Midwest corn is pretty damn good. So we weren't getting poor quality of anything ever. But then we're like, we still want it to be from Colorado. And we ran into this person. Her family owned a farm out in Burlington, and they put in corn. She asked me straight out, said, "Why don't you buy our family's corn?" I'm like, "Don't know who you are, but it'd be really great. Yeah, well, give me your card." And from that conversation, her and her sister started Whiskey Sister Supply. And from that, because they said, "Hey, this is something," because we pay more than commodity prices for these grains, right?
Sure.
We want them triple clean. Like, we use dent number 1, right? So it's super clean. They'll clean it to that standard, and we don't want stuff from 2 years ago. It has to be from the calendar year, prior calendar year. So we always get it fresh. The malts, to the extent that we don't use tons of malt, as you know, in bourbon and rye, but like, to the extent we use them, they're almost warm when they show up. They were kilned like the day before. They're in a big thing. They still have some heat signature to them. So fresh matters in the aromatics and all these kind of things. Like, all these things do matter. In addition to the heirloom varietal, where it's grown, like again, the terroir from the soils that it's grown in. And all these things matter. Like, nothing happens really by accident at Law's Whiskey House. It's all like, all these things are purposeful. And if we change something, we'll have a null hypothesis. We're changing this because of this, and we think it's going to have this impact. Sometimes it doesn't, but we go into it thinking about what we're doing in a very methodical way.
Okay.
So, but yeah, the grains matter. Like, they matter tons, and technique matters. Pot stills matter. A lot of people go, "Oh, well, this." Yeah, I don't have a column still, and I don't have a column still, and I could have bought one when an upgrade, but I don't want that. I want grain contact, copper contact, and want it to cycle and cycle and get more and more out of the substrate and the grain, right? So I want those concentrated flavors.
As I said, we're talking about Bottled and Bond Day. You don't just have a Bottled and Bond bourbon. You have 3, is that right? A rye and a wheat?
No, we have more than that.
So, more than that.
Yeah. So we started with Bottled and Bond 4-grain. So we were the first Bottled and Bond expression in Colorado history, and I think the 4-grain the first. I think we beat E.H. Taylor by a few months, but theirs was 10 years old, ours was 4. So let's be completely upfront and frank about that. So, and ours tastes like the 4-grains. Like, we can pick out all the 4-grains. It's difficult.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's difficult when you're making it on a column still. It's just an opinion more than a fact.
Well, and 10 years has got to kind of hide it under some oak too.
There's a really good point right there, because like, we like fruity, grainy kind of front end to our bourbon. That's what we wanted to make, something really approachable for anybody, sort of like Maker's Mark would be. And then we wanted some layers that come after that in complexity, sort of like Four Roses single barrel was what we used as our benchmark.
Okay.
And so that's what we designed. And so 4 years, it's good like that, up to about 6. And then after that, it starts to taste more like traditional, like bourbon that you would get out of Kentucky. So in the last few years, we've used 7 and 8 year old barrels. The last 2 years, we like the 7s better. So we've used those. I think next year we might have another shot at 8 again, but we like this, but they're very much closer to what you traditionally think of in Kentucky bourbon. And we're in the mountains, so we get a different type of aging here because of barometric pressure swings, elevation, all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, I remember your guys telling me that they really thought the pressure swings hit it harder than the high altitude or the humidity.
Yeah, the temps definitely matter. And we get hot here. Like we're an upper mountain desert, so we get hot, and we welcome that into the aging facilities. But we also get like erratic barometric pressure swings being against the Front Range. And I mean like really erratic. Like I can tell because I get a headache right away. I'm like, the weather's changing. And it'll change the pressure gradient, and it'll affect the distillation because you're only like 3 psi top of column, right? Of the, we have a pot column still. So it's like, So if you have a high pressure thing and it pushes down on you, you can slow that distillation down. So we see it in that, but that doesn't, maybe it adds an hour or something like that. So not too big a deal. But in the aging process, that change in pressure gradient from inside the barrel to the outside pushes the whiskey into the wood, and then erratically drops quickly and it comes out again. So you have something else making the barrel pump like a heart, right? And so right away, early on, we get a lot of one of the 3 parts of maturation, right? We get infusion quickly. So if you're using little barrels, and we don't do that, that's a shortcut. And the little barrel stuff, like it'll get over infused very quickly.
Yeah.
So you then, but we also, because it's dry, we lose a lot. We lose water more so than alcohol, and we'll get like headspace pretty quick, and then we'll get oxidization starting, which is a good thing. And then, we still believe in time. So, I'd love it to be ready at 2, but I'm a whiskey geek and it ain't ready at 2. And at 4, we really love it. At 3.5, it's really good too. But we get these extra things out of it. So people go, oh, it tastes like it's older. Well, it tastes not because of the infusion. But, as it gets older, you still need age. And age does matter. And we have stuff that's 12, and our flagship bourbon, 4-grain, we put tenure in it because it's already over 4, and we put we just mix in what we have. I'm like, let's add a layer. Let's put some 10 in it. And at 10, if you like woody whiskey, we got that for you because it's just spent so much time like pumping like a heart. It goes deep into the wood, the red line on the staves.
Wow.
And like you just get a lot out of them. So it's a different environment, and we're obviously welcoming that and trying to embrace it because it's part of our terroir, right?
Yeah. What is it about bottled in bond that would appeal to the consumer? What does it mean to them?
Well, I think, I'll tell you what it means to me first. I think it means...
Yeah, obviously I'm asking like what's in their head, and that's kind of hard, but...
Well, it's a stamp of authenticity, right? You made it, and you made it under pretty restrictive standards. You're like, it's the same as like, straight bourbon whiskey. It is, but it's more. Single season matters. Like that's
right.
And it plays to us because we only use grain of the prior year. So we get vintage sort of, which the TTP won't let you use.
Right.
But we sort of have that, and then we have this much smaller sample set to pick from. So we had to be dead on in our processes. So in order to create, uniform things that we can put into this batch, and I'll give you my biases too. 2 barrels of something is not a bottled in bond, or 1 barrel is not a bottled in bond to me. That's a single barrel.
Yeah.
It has to be a batch, and to us, it needs to be commercial quantity. So I don't think we're ever less than like 10 barrels in a batch. And that's if we're doing something small. And usually it's our bottle and bond stuff is like in the 20 barrel range. It's nothing like Heaven Hill would have 200, 300, maybe more than that. But like they're the keeper of the bond. I'm not going to argue with that. But we have a 4-grain bottle and bond. We have a rye bottle, 100% rye bottle and bond. We have 100% wheat whiskey bottle and bond. We don't put this out a lot, but we have a bottle and bond malt whiskey, which now would be single malt, I guess. We'll put that out later this year. We only do it every couple of years. And we have a corn whiskey bottle and bond, which we don't sell widely. We just mostly sell at the tasting room. But so we have all these things that follow the bonded, principles, and it means something to us. And for a little company like us, and for starting out with, a lot of our peers are all sourcing it, and that's a business model. God bless. That's not our model, and it's not the road the road that we chose to take, and the bumps on the way to do what we're trying to do. But we get to plant a flag there. It's like, this is us. We did this. It's real. It's the authentic bottle of bond whiskey that tastes awesome.
So there are other bottle and bond wheats, but I've never had one yet.
Yeah.
What is it? What is it about a wheat whiskey?
So everyone loves wheated bourbon, right? Like, people like the sweeter notes, and wheated bourbon takes longer to develop. So rye bourbon, quicker. You can turn that quicker. It integrates better. Wheat's tough. Like, it's a strong grain, and it's not quite as strong as rye, but what it does is it has more nuances to it. There's a lot more perfume to it. We had a lot more like citrus notes out of it.
Yes.
Varietal. Yeah.
I've always thought that. Yeah.
And I'll tell you what I like about ours is we put this out in the spring, because it's one of the only ones that I would prefer to drink it on ice, because the orange notes are kind of like orange peel for a bit, and then you put the ice on it, and it takes the edges off, and it creams it, so it becomes like an orange creamsicle. And then the last part of it that I love is there's like a sarsaparilla root beer thing, and I love root beer. So it has that in it too, which makes it a very distinctive tasting whiskey that is, if you're into different things, it's a high quality whiskey that happens to be made all from wheat. And I
love that you are so grain focused. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's like grain. So from the 4-grain, our next step was to deconstruct the 4-grain and make 100% or close to that. At the beginning, we had a hard time with that. Single grain whiskeys to highlight, again, the terroir of the area and the varietal and the grain and all these things, and show you how, when you sip the 4-grain, you start with the sweetness of the corn, you get the penny metallic bite of the rye, and then you get this baking, doughy cinnamon bun, baking spice thing, and orange from the wheat, and then the nuttiness from the barley. All those come in our 4-grain in every sip. You can trace that. You can really trace it if you put them up against the single grain whiskeys that were, made the same way, same yeast strain, everything. It's really good. It's a very different and distinctive thing, but it's harder to get people to try that. And I think these are things that we do better in, because there's no preconceived notion of what they are. When you make a bourbon, known as 4-grain or not, everyone knows or has an idea. Knows is a strong word.
Yeah.
Of what it's supposed to taste like, or what they believe it tastes, because Kentucky does it well. It is, and Tennessee does it well. Indiana does it well. They do this very well. And this is what we've all grown up around, saying this is what American whiskey is. Well, we're using traditional techniques, and we're like the kid that left home, and we're now selling somewhere else, and we're trying to put our spin or put our area on the map, just like in Scotland, right? You have Speyside, you have Highlands, you have Orkney, you have all these different areas that have distinctive different flavor profiles to their whiskey because of where they're made. And I think that's what's happening in America. Like, clearly in Texas, that's happening.
Yes.
Happening here. Upstate New York's happening. Minnesota, use different barrels up there. Use oak, same varietal, but grown up there, different flavor,
absolutely,
and tastes different. Presents different things from the wood. It's all amazing. That's so amazing, and we love that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we're just scratching that. That's the best part. I love that.
Yeah.
So, just to wrap up, do you have plans for Bottled and Bond Day?
Yeah, we have a brand new tasting room, right?
Nice.
We call it the Whiskey Sanctuary. It took us 7 years to get it built. It's hard to get anything built in Denver. So like 5 years of permitting and fighting to get just able to start it, and it took 2 years to construct it, but it opened finally in December. So it's been open for about 60 days.
Okay.
We have some stuff going on there. We definitely have like all of our bonded things being featured that day. In fact, I think I'm going to an event. I think we're doing the 4th. I think the 3rd's a Sunday, right? Or is it a Monday? It's a Monday.
Okay.
So we're not open Monday. So we're doing it on the 4th. We're doing like an interactive bottle and bond thing with what we have in our portfolio.
There you
go. But yeah, we have some good stuff. And yeah, like I said, everyone has their favorites. The bottle and bond rye has done very well in like whiskey magazine competitions and those kind of things over the years. And it's very distinctive. And just like I said, on bourbon, everyone knows what it's supposed to taste like. In rye, in wheat whiskey, and even I think what's great about American single malt is no one knows what's supposed to taste like.
No one knows. Yeah.
So it allows for a lot of discovery. And for you, instead of thinking, oh, it's supposed to taste like this, you go, I like this. That's okay. You're allowed to like something because it tastes good. So, and I think rye is very different. And a lot of the rye that was made before had corn in it. So the closer you get, different varietals of rye, especially, all taste different. So we can present those to folks at this bottle and bond day. And the corn whiskey is very elegant and floral, and because it has to be in a used container, we put it in used rye barrels, used wheat whiskey barrels. So we can create different levels of corn whiskey, which is very high. Like we don't have rye or something in it, although we do have barley in it because we couldn't get 100% converted very well. So we didn't have good conversion rate. So we used 18% nutty, very nutty scarlet barley in it. So we get our corn whiskey is different. I would rather drink it out of the bottle around a campfire than really put it in a glass. It has this kind of rough elegance to it.
I really have my fingers crossed for corn whiskey. I'm hoping it's going to have a moment. There's some really good ones out there right now.
Yeah, there's there's some stuff out of Texas. Like my favorite corn whiskey is probably that Balcones, that True Blue.
Oh, the True Blue, yeah.
I love that. Like, it's
so very nice. Yeah. Very nice. All right. Well, that's all I have.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, that was fun. Thank you.
Anytime, my friend.
All right. I hope to get out again soon.
Yeah, get out here and have a cocktail in our new whiskey sanctuary.
Yes.
Yeah, it's awesome.
All right, man.
Okay.
Take care. Yep. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, I promised you a shot and a beer. Here comes your chaser. I mentioned that I thought I had caught a bad cold at Philly Beer Fest, but I wasn't sick when we got back from the beer fest, and that's a good thing, because we had tickets to the Day of Delicious Darkness at Elk Creek Cafe. We settled the dogs and walked down the hill and got in line. There's always a line for the Day of Delicious Darkness, but it's a friendly line. Then 4 o'clock came, and people started filing in. We took a seat at the far side of the room and just happened to sit beside a table of folks that mostly went to owner Tim Bowser's high school, including the sister of East End Brewing's Scott Smith. It's a small freaking world. The beers came, 4 at a time. There were 5 Elk Creek beers and 3 guest beers, 2 from Clarion River Brewing and 1 from Axeman Brewing, all 3 made by graduates of the Penn Tech Brewing program taught by Elk Creek's head brewer, Tim Yarrington. There were porters, dunkels, stouts, including one aged in those barrels I told you about transporting a while back, which was fun to see. It was all kind of the usual suspects, but there were 2 less usual ones. Clarion River's Devin Smith brought a barley wine, a rich, silky malt bomb that might have been my favorite of the day. She also had an imperial stout that was right on the money, but it was the barrel-aged Skjoring Baltic Porter that Rachel Gobin made at Axeman that got me thinking. See, Devin had brought me a 4-pack of an oak-aged Baltic Porter she'd made with Aslan Brewing, and up at the house I had a crowler of Victory Baltic Thunder I'd picked up last month, and I got the last remaining can of Percuno's Hammer at Barhuga. Ken Carell of Human Robot had run into me at the parking lot of the beer fest and given me a can of a Baltic Porter they'd done, and the Axeman Skjoring made 5, How often do you get to try 5 Baltic Porters side by side? Sorry, for those of you thinking, I don't know, what is a Baltic Porter and why is he so excited about this? Let me explain. It's a style of beer that developed around the Baltic Sea in Poland, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, Finland. It is, generally, a dark, rich, fairly strong beer that tasted like a porter, was brewed the lager way, cold and long. That led me to describe it as a train wreck between an imperial stout and a double bock, something Tom Baker picked up and put in the advertising for Perkuno's Hammer. All right, wait a minute, Tom Baker. Right, that's why Baltic Porter means so much to me. Let me explain. Back in the 90s, Tom Baker opened a one-man brewery, Heavyweight Brewing, in Ocean Township, New Jersey. Little brewery, big beers was the idea, and as soon as I saw that, I sent him a package in the mail with 3 Polish examples of the style, Okocim, Dojliti, and Zawicz, and a cover letter telling him, begging him, that a Baltic Porter should be a beer he made. About 2 months later, he got back to me. Let's make a beer, he said. So early one morning, I drove over and got to work, dumping sacks of malt, pouring in bags of beans. We discovered that some of the Baltic breweries use beans in the mash as a source of starch, stirring the mash and then letting the wort boil while we played ping pong. He kicked my butt. I did come up with a few suggestions for names, but the one I was really pulling for was Perkuno's Hammer, named for an old Baltic thunder deity said to be middle-aged, red-headed, and ornery. We settled on that. Tom made one run. There were maybe 10 kegs and 200 750 milliliter bottles. It was a fun thing, and people enjoyed it. And then they started asking for more, and it became a year-round beer for Heavyweight. I overheard a bartender in Manhattan telling a customer that it was the best effing beer he'd ever had. That was a moment. Perkuno's Hammer had such a loyal following that when Tom dissolved the brewery, the guys at Victory Brewing asked him if he'd mind if they made an homage beer. I hope you can hear the air quotes here, consulted on that one too, and it became Baltic Thunder, also popular. Then Tom opened a brew pub, Earthbread and Brewery in Philadelphia. Long story short, too late, I know, he eventually brewed another batch of Perkuno's Hammer, and it won a gold medal at the Great American Beer Festival. He invited me over and we celebrated. It was a good night. He later opened a second place, which is Bar Huga, and Perkuno's became a semi-regular there, which is where my wife and son and I all had some just 2 weeks ago. So here I am, over 25 years into this long, interrupted, against-the-odds journey with this great beer, a gold medal under our belts, and 2 breweries are making their versions of it again, and I've got both of them to present to brewers I respect. I really wanted to do this. When the day of delicious darkness was winding down, I made my way to the bar and put my proposal to Tim and Devin. Come back to the house when you're done, and we can taste 5 Baltic Porters. They were in. After all, it just doesn't happen very often. It didn't happen that night either. By the time Tim and Devin had cleaned up and grabbed a burger at the Fire Company bar, it was pushing 8:30, and after a long, long weekend, I'll admit, I was crashing. We agreed to meet the next day, Monday afternoon, at Elk Creek, and to my surprise, it actually happened. I walked down, we set up at the bar, and recorded what you're about to hear. How we did it was taste all the beers, and then set up the mics and record the discussion of what we'd tasted. Here's what we thought. Hey, I'm at Elk Creek Cafe in beautiful downtown Millheim. I'm with the brewmaster here, Tim Yarrington. I also have the brewmaster from Clarion River Brewing, Devin Smith, who we talked to a few episodes back. Guys, thanks for joining us. And thanks for hosting us here, Tim. Yeah. Appreciate it. We got together because we realized we had I won't say a unique opportunity, but a rare opportunity to cross 6 Baltic Porters. Yeah. I guess 5 officially, and then we're going to sip a 6th during the show. We had Day of Delicious Darkness here at Elk Creek yesterday, the annual event they do that's all about dark beers, and we had a Baltic Porter from Axeman Brewing over in Axeman, PA. It was a corn whiskey barrel aged Baltic Porter, and I had just been at the Philly Beer Fest the day before and had picked up 2 Baltic Porters there, and I had another one in my fridge from Victory And Devin just did one recently with in a collaboration with Aslan Brewing, their Pittsburgh brewery. Okay, we were going to do this last night, and I kind of fell asleep. So we got a chance to do it today.
It was a long day.
It was a long day.
You had a long day before that.
Weekend.
So we've got these. This is one style, and I'm going to describe that in the podcast before, so we don't have to get into that here. But we found some fairly large differences among these beers.
Yeah, different approaches and different takes flavor-wise, and then some that took post-fermentation steps that changed the beers also.
Yeah. So the first two we did are kind of my touchstone for American brewed Baltic porters anyway. Victory Baltic Thunder and Techne's Perkuno's Hammer, both of which I many years ago had a hand in helping to formulate and bring to the marketplace. I named Perkuno's Hammer, and Tom Baker and I kind of fumbled our way to a mash bill for it that included a large addition of Roman beans, something I'd read about. But what do we think here? I mean, they're not the same.
not the same, but all appealing in their own ways. I feel like the flavor profiles are surprising at times and also complex in a really sort of pleasing way. But it's really cool to see such a wide variation of flavor presentations within a single style.
What would you say pulls the five of them together?
Well, color.
Obviously they're all dark.
Color. Yeah, but not just dark, but dark in a particular way. They're deep amber, leading into brown and ruby reds. They get a lot of red. They're certainly not
nice
black.
Touches there. Yeah.
Maybe in a bigger glass, they might present a little bit on the black side, but in the size that we're tasting, which is small, getting some really, really wonderful reds out of just about every single one of these things. Beyond that, then you get into alcohol, and they're all assertive.
Yeah, I think the lowest is 8.
Yeah, and that's even questionable because then they went into a bourbon barrel. And
right.
I feel like
I suspect there was definitely some whiskey in that barrel.
So, but beyond that, then you get into, I don't know, fermentation characteristics, how we're playing with roastedness, how we're playing with maltiness, and there's a lot of room to move around there. And they're all, like I said, in their own way, they're all quite appealing. So,
yeah. Devin, you actually brewed one of these with Aslan, the A-OK.
A-OK.
Yeah. Why did you decide to do a Baltic Porter?
Both myself and the brewer at Aslan had some time coming into winter, and we really wanted to think about winter beers and really bring a good winter beer to the table and to the taps.
Okay.
And that was just what we landed on when we discussed, okay, if we're going to brew a beer, what are we going to make?
Baltic Porter is not one when you think of when you're thinking, what light, refreshing beer can I have on the beach in August? Not the one that comes to mind.
I'm sure there's somebody out there that
would
argue with you, but they're in the minority.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And then you chose to, this is the post-fermentation thing Tim was talking about, you aged that in a different way than usual. How'd you do that?
We did. So post-fermentation, it went into an oak foeder. And the foeder wasn't really used for like any wild fermentations or any kind of spontaneous fermentation or anything. And it didn't really have anything fruited in it previously. It's a pretty well-kept and well-cleaned oak foeder. So all we were really looking for out of that foeder was just oak.
Yeah,
so,
and I mean, we commented on this. We've tasted all the beers, and as we were tasting, we commented on how it was clean, had no trace of funk to it at all. So obviously they're doing a good job on that. But there's also, at the same time, I think your beer was one of the lighter bodied beers, but at the same time, really one of the more complex ones. How did you do that? Do you know? Or did it just happen? Or
I really think that the foeder kind of lent to that complexity. There's so much that layers into the malt and the hops once you take another step post-fermentation, whether it's an oak foeder or whether it's a bourbon barrel or a wine barrel, whatever it is, there's so much else that is so complex living in, living in that vessel that then layers in with everything else that you've got going on.
Yeah. Tim, the one beer that stuck out for you and I for sure was the Human Robot Hell because of the hopping rate. And this is, I know it's not your beer, but this seems like a hop that you're more familiar with, the Styrian Golding.
Yeah, and it's really,
it's your kind of hop.
Yeah, it's present, and they're using it in a pretty. It takes a good bit of weight of that hop to get the kind of character that they're getting out of it. So it's a unique approach to this style that you don't really usually think hop first, but they brought that to it in a way that I thought was somewhat clever and not overly distracting. Usually you think about these beers and you think malt first, and you think about the rich roastedness and the alcohol, the elevated alcohol content, and the way that lends itself to an overall experience of sort of viscous density. And this thing just came forward right out of the gate with this really bright top hop thing. And also they elevated the IBUs on it in a way that I thought was a variation on the style that was unique.
Yeah, it was the first time. It actually took me a little while to get past the hops in the nose. I didn't want to stop smelling.
Yeah.
So it took me a while to actually get that first sip in.
And it's still there. I mean, even though they sat there.
Well, that was another thing I wanted to talk to you guys about, coming back to them. What's going on there when you go back? Don't look to your teacher. I want to hear from you.
I was looking to my beer to grab it.
She's going back.
Yeah, I'm going back.
So what's going on here? I mean, they taste different after sitting for a while.
I mean, it's definitely something that happens a lot with those darker beer styles. As they warm up and they open up, they present differently. Not like a completely different beer. I mean, sometimes, but it really opens a lot up. Kind of like when wine breathes, it definitely changes how it presents.
Well, I noticed a lot of difference all these beers were in cans except the last one that we tasted, which was off the tap, noticeably colder and a bit more closed.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah. When you let a beer, well, also the glasses that we're using these big open mouth glasses. Yeah. Really let the beer breathe out, let it warm up, and then when you agitate it, these glasses in particular will hold those aromatics in there. And I always find that you get really multiple experiences on a beer. To taste it cold, fresh out of the faucet or the can is one thing. To let it stand, degas the beer a bit, let it warm up a bit, especially a beer of this complexity. Like, I might not do this with an IPA or a bright IPA or a bright pale ale as much, but when I get into these dark, rich beers, the higher ABV, the maltier beers, I really want to warm those up. And I wish, even at my bar, I wish I could vary temperature. From, I'd like to have my porter and my brown to pour at an elevated temperature. Sure. Because it really impacts the beer and your perception of the beer. My porter and my brown are very different when you let them warm up and degas them a bit.
Well, that's because my wife and I drink a lot of your Kolsch. I have to believe that's why Kolsch is traditionally served in small glasses, because they don't want you to drink it.
Right.
You got to drink it the way they want it.
It should be. Yeah, some beers lend themselves, like a Pilsner, I would never want to warm up.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to encourage it to do so. I want to experience it in that condition. If I'm looking for flaws, now that's a different thing. When I'm tasting in the brewery, I'm degassing and warming every beer I taste, because that's where you're really going to get, nothing's going to hide then. It's going to all be coming off and volatilizing at those elevated temperatures, and get that gas out of the way and make sure that your palate is picking up every single thing that's in the beer. So anyway, I think these beers in particular, and the beers that we poured yesterday at the event, also are, and if I could have elevated our dispensed temperature yesterday through our pour, arrangement, I would have done. But
well, I think that's one one place where the smaller glasses actually help.
Yep.
It does warm up a bit faster.
And another reason why we pre-pour in advance, so the beer gets out, it gets breathed. Then we try to top the glasses up before they hit the table so that they have a nice, top freshness on top, but the body of the beer has already been allowed to go through a bit of that breathing.
Yeah. So we had your oak aged Baltic Porter, but we also had 2 whiskey barrel aged, because I think one was a bourbon and one was a corn, I suspect.
Correct. Yep.
Just from the flavor of it. Both from Axeman, both using Big Spring whiskey barrels. Tell me what's different there, Devin. I mean, this one we're drinking is really different.
Yeah,
that's
for sure.
Heavily barreled.
Yep.
Now I have to go back.
Absolutely. Got to do that.
Just trying to get you drunk.
I'm trying to avoid it myself.
Yeah, exactly. It's been a long weekend.
Yes, it has. Yeah, we're actually sipping the 6th one, which is a 2022.
Yeah, so Phil Jensen, the distiller for Big Springs, came out to the event yesterday, as he does, which is awesome, and brought us this gift, knowing that we had the 2024 version, and he had been involved with the lending the barrel to Axeman, and I don't know if he's involved in the beer recipe also.
I think it's his homebrew recipe.
Yeah, I think it is. So anyway, he brought us this 2022 bottle. We didn't know what we were in for when we opened it, and it held up really well.
Yes.
I feel like it really held up nicely, and it is very interesting to compare the 2022 to the 2024. Obviously, the 2022's got 2 more years on it, but it also has a lot more barrel contribution. You agree, Devin? Yeah.
I agree. I definitely agree.
You just did a little deep dive on those. What did you get?
I get a lot of almost kind of sweetness in the 2024. It's a little bit sweeter. You can definitely tell that it's a little bit younger. Mm-hmm. The kind of the whiskey notes, that leather, that caramel, they're a little more sharp. And then the 2022, it like Tim said, it's definitely older, but it's almost as though those have kind of mellowed into each other, and they're not so strong, standalone, and
like
sharp.
Beer, barrel, this is more both.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I get a lot of mocha, like mocha cocoa chocolate, malt, like chocolate covered malt ball out of that 2022 that I wasn't really getting out of the 2024. 2024 is a little bit feels less dense to me. Mm-hmm. I feel like, and
this 22 is more like some kind of like Christmas pudding, or
a lot like a lot thicker.
Yeah,
in its presence.
And I'm definitely getting more of the oaky vanilla out of that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So different barrel contribution between the two. Barrel's present in the 2024.
Oh yeah,
but it's just present in a very different way.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, okay, great dive into a style that is a favorite of mine. I've always liked the Baltic Porters. Thanks for the space. Thanks for your expertise. Yours. Good time.
No, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
glad we got to do it. Yeah, awesome. Thanks for the pretzels. I'll mention splits. But...
All right, see what happens. All right, guys.
All right,
thanks. I hope you enjoyed that at least half as much as I did. This beer has been a favorite type of mine for over 30 years, and this reminded me of why. It's been a long journey, and I haven't regretted a single wave-tossed, malt-blasted step of it. That's the show. Thanks to Al Laws for the interview, and to Tim Yarrington and Devin Smith for suffering through those delicious Baltic Porters with me. You can find pictures for this episode on Instagram at Stag Podcast and on Facebook at Seen Through a Glass. If you're listening to the show on the radio at WSOV, there are over 40 more episodes to enjoy, including a Milheim episode and a Nittany Valley episode at seenthroughaglass.podbean.com. Or you can find us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to toss a bit in my hat to keep the show going, I have a coffee button in my Instagram link tree. That's at Stag Podcast, and at the Facebook page. Thank you. I thought you might like a weird fact about beans, given their role in brewing Percuno's hammer. Do you remember Pythagoras, the Greek mathematician and philosopher? Maybe the Pythagorean theorem? Well, Pythagoras was a vegetarian, famously so, but he refused to eat beans, believing that they were a path for souls to return to life. So much so that when he was running from a bloodthirsty mob, rogue philosophers, who knew, he actually stopped because there was a bean field in front of him. The mob caught up with him and killed him, but no beans were harmed. Pretty wild. What's coming up? I've got a few irons in the fire, but I promise we won't do another whiskey episode for a while. We'll see what I can come up with in 2 weeks. Until then, thanks for listening. This is Lou Bryson with Seen Through a Glass from the smack dab center of the Keystone State.